The Lions with their first playoff win since 1993. All sorts of records were set here. This will be the first time in NFL history that the Lions will host 2 playoff games in a season. Their first time in their history. And so the Lions, they get to thank the Packers for the upset of the Cowboys for a second home playoff game in Detroit. The Dome was electric last night. And I told you after Week 18, when Carson Wentz got that 2-point conversion, I was very excited that those became the matchups. Packers, Cowboys, and Lions, Rams. And I don't think we were disappointed, especially in this game. Stafford, Goff, both guys played well. It was back and forth. What a game and what a win by the Detroit Lions.
Yeah, it really was. This was a game where I think the only thing I wanted heading into this game was for Jared Goff not to be absolutely embarrassed by the Rams. I felt like that would have been mean, if they had just absolutely flexed on Goff and then been like, see, this is why we had to get rid of you. And look, we tried to make it, quiet. We tried to just trade you away, but you had to come back and force us to do this to you again. This is really your fault, not ours. I'm just glad that didn't happen. But certainly for the first half, Goff and the Rams or the Lions offense looked great. Both offenses were just trading haymakers. And then everyone stopped scoring in the second half. And eventually the Rams were able to move the ball and start putting field goals on the board. You're like, at some point, the Lions are going to need to score again. And then right at the death, they were able to lean on their run game, which has been so good all season long. Like Jahmyr Gibbs looked fantastic again in this game. And they were able to chew up like the last few minutes of the game and just not give the Rams another shot to win it. Really impressive performance from the Lions, both sides of the ball. I thought the Rams were pretty impressive as well. Matthew Stafford was incredible. Puka Nacua set a rookie record in this game for receiving yards in a playoff game, like 181 yards for him. He was climbing up the leaderboard as the game went on. Like pretty early in the game, he already had more receiving yards in a game than Torrey Holt had ever had for the Rams. Greatest show on turf, Hall of Fame type wide receiver. He'd overtaken Isaac Bruce. And now he was bearing down on some guy from the 50s again, as it's always the case. And then he ends the game with 181, a rookie record for the playoffs.
Puka was unbelievable in this one. I really think a lot of this went as you might expect. The Lions are a better team. They're better all around. I think Stafford, another game where he just made some incredible throws, man, and he just gets hurt again and plays through it. Multiple injuries in this one. Stafford getting popped. He hit his hand on a helmet again, and as I tweeted out last night, I swear he does this more than any quarterback in the NFL. Hits his hand on an opposing helmet or whatever, which every time you see that, you just
gotta hurt so much.
You just think about, like, Russell Wilson missed 5 or 6 weeks. Drew Brees missed some time the last few years. Like, a lot of times you're breaking bones when you do that, and you can't throw the ball. And
it was also like on his hand that is already mangled. Like they first showed it, and I'm like, wow, they got a bandage on that pretty quickly. Like, no, that's from the last time he did it.
Yeah. But I think a lot of this game was kind of like as expected. The Rams are the underdog, and Stafford's got to make some special throws. The Lions are a better team. Goff was matching because he's got better receivers, and like both secondaries, I think, struggled and had struggles over much of the season that you'd expect them to give up big plays. It was it was a dome game early on, right?
Yeah.
Big time throws and explosive plays on both sides of the ball, but both defenses really cracked down. And then the difference in the game is the Lions winning in the red zone, right? The Rams moving the ball, the Lions cracking down in the red zone. There's some game management stuff that we can get into that was a huge factor at the end, but man, got to give credit to the Lions for holding on too. They held on to this onslaught. There was definitely a point in the game where I was like, man, if you give Stafford too many opportunities, he might pull this thing out for the Rams.
Well,
but the Lions held on, man.
Not just holding on, but they took control. When they had the ball with a few minutes left,
yes,
we need whatever it is, 3 or 4 first downs. They got them. They didn't just cling on and eventually got it done. The Rams weren't able to execute. They took control of that and said, no, not happening. Okay, we haven't had the drives in the second half. We're getting it this time. We're not letting this game get away from us. And they they won it that way. So that I thought was pretty impressive.
So at the end of the game, first off, the game sealing play was it 2nd and 9 coming out of the 2-minute warning, and the Lions came out passing. All right, they've got the Rams have one timeout left, and was it one timeout or they had no timeouts?
Yeah, one time.
They had one timeout.
Well, they
left.
might have had.
They had one. They saved it for after the 2-minute warning. It's 2nd and 9, and the Lions just come out passing, little 10-yard curl to Amon-Ra St. Brown, convert it, and that was it. That's all they needed was one first down, and they came out chucking it. They'd already picked up a first down on the ground to help run out the clock. But the Rams only having one timeout because every year Sean McVay uses more timeouts to avoid delay of game penalties than any coach in the NFL. And it's really not that close. And it's absolutely at the point. And by the way, when he took the timeout, I think it was the second one, I think it was a 3rd and 7, and they came out of the timeout and converted it. So at the time, it's like, okay, I mean, if you make the conversion and you saved the 5 yards, maybe it balances out. But over time, those timeouts are massive.
But also that second one, like the crowd was booing when they gave them the timeout rather than delay of game, right? The crowd was reacting. It was like, woo, you're like, that's better for you.
Oh, the timeout's
like you win,
massive.
and it ended up proving that way. But like half of Twitter was like, do they not understand that the timeout is actually a better thing for the Lions than getting that 5 yards in that situation? The McVay, two things in this game that were in game. It's interesting for a guy that's like, remember we've said before, some of the most amazing things are Sean McVay doing interviews during preseason whilst coaching the game and like talking through plays live as they're happening. For a guy that's capable of doing that and having this like robotic memory retrieval system for any play that's ever occurred in NFL history, how does a guy that does that make several in-game sort of tactical decisions that don't seem to make a ton of sense, like that one, or in a first half where teams are trading haymakers, they eventually get the ball. Like the Lions punted away, the Rams get the ball. They got a minute left, and okay, it's at their own 5, so it's not like
they're really backed up.
Yes, your own 5, but you have a minute on the clock and Matthew Stafford dealing, and you have an offense that's humming right now. You don't want to at least give it a shot. Instead, they're just like, no, we're going to run the ball once and then bail in the half. I mean, everyone stopped scoring in the second half. I might have at least given it a shot before halftime. A minute is a long time.
Yeah, I don't know. That one didn't stand out to me a ton. I'll tell you what the interesting decisions are. When you only have the one timeout, and there was 8 minutes left, and the Rams kicked a field goal to make it 24-23. That doesn't seem crazy at the time. There's 8 minutes left, right? And it's you kick a field goal, you get within 1, and it's like, okay, surely we'll have another possession, and we can go kick a go-ahead field goal. We need to stop, and we can kick a go-ahead field goal. And they did have that opportunity. But then that's one in hindsight where it's like the one timeout matters. And when you do model the fourth down stuff, the timeouts are a very important input into this entire thing. Because having 3 timeouts versus 1 pretty much costs you a possession. It's essentially it's one less possession. So when you're sitting there with 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter and you're saying, sure, we'll kick a field goal, we'll get another possession. You also could say, well, we're going to go for it. I know we're down 4. If we don't get it, we're still down 4. We're going to need a touchdown. But we might have to take this chance because we might have only 1 possession instead of 2 that we would normally have if we had the 3 timeouts. I'm saying the timeouts make a difference in the late game, go for it decisions and everything. But I would just going back to like the second and 9 call by the Lions. Just a few weeks ago in the Dallas-Detroit game on Saturday night, remember Dallas threw the ball on second down, and everybody and that was a little different situation. They literally probably could have run the clock and finished the game, and they throw an incompletion on second down, and it's like this is the only chance that Detroit has to win was the incompletion. Detroit wasn't exactly at that point, but if that pass is incomplete, the Rams get a free timeout. And they'd have about $120 left with Stafford making special throws all day, you just need one big throw to get into field goal range. If that pass is incomplete, that's the only chance the Rams have, basically.
Yeah.
But that's Dan Campbell.
Gutsy.
He is aggressive no matter what, and it worked, right? And he trusted his best players, and it was like, I was watching their skill position players, like I just love how everything's come together for the Lions. You see Jahmyr Gibbs just running through tackles, and Amon-Ra St. Brown, the toughness that he brings to the table. It's even their skill positions feel like they exude Dan Campbell's personality and toughness and aggressiveness. They are really fun to watch, Detroit, the way they play offensively and the way they just have developed this roster. And I'm happy for the Lions that they have turned this into a playoff win. That it wasn't just, hey, they've gotten better and they're more competitive now. They turned it into a playoff win. They hosted a home playoff game. They're going to host another one. Really cool for Detroit, the city, and everything that they've done these last 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great feel-good story for them. They hadn't won a game since the early Barry Sanders era. Crazy. And before that, like their previous game was another like 35-year playoff drought as well in terms of winning a playoff game. So, yeah, this season they were supposed to be better. They were. They had a couple of games during the season where it threatened to unravel on them, and they pulled it back together again. They made it to where they were supposed to be, which is win the division, make the playoffs, and now they're adding to that. They've won a playoff game. Whether they can keep it together and actually legitimately threaten, San Francisco and make the championship game and the Super Bowl, who knows? But they're one of the teams out there for whom just doing this is, a great win for the fan base. Like this has been one of the most downtrodden franchises for decades, and for them to get back, not just be relevant, but actually win that playoff game, make some noise is great.
Really, so we're having all these Tua discussions in Miami where people are talking about, is he worth the money? Is he capped? Can he not just sidestep a pass rusher and make a play? Well, then look at Jared Goff, a guy that a team that gave up on him and said, he's hit his ceiling. Mm-hmm. We've hit our ceiling as a team, is what the Rams said. And by the way, the Rams weren't necessarily wrong. Like, they were justified in trading for Matthew Stafford. Like, that's the narrative is, like, if Stafford and the Rams hadn't won a Super Bowl, this one hurts them even more, right? They still got their Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford. They were justified in their move. But Jared Goff is also justified. He felt beat up by the Rams. He felt like he had hit rock bottom. They lost confidence in him. They talked about on the broadcast how much confidence he had lost in himself. His PFF grade in his first year with the Lions wasn't great, but he started to build it back up, and he's had these spurts where he's played outstanding football. And it was another unbelievable game by Goff, pretty much throw for throw. He was there. He had that little brain fart throw backwards play. Other than that,
it is great if you
was good.
If you could go through a game and you'd be like, look, if we could just arrange it so that the worst thing I do in this game doesn't count, that'll be outstanding.
Yeah.
So that's effectively what Goff, he got a mulligan effectively on the worst thing he did in that game, which was like a wild panic, two-handed like basketball pass, chest pass, out of the grasp of Aaron Donald, having initially tried to sidestep Aaron Donald one-on-one in the open field, which didn't go well. Like, that was a terrible play that had the capacity to be an absolute disaster. He basically fumbled the ball away, and a tight end was able to fall on it and recover, and so nobody counted. No harm, no foul. But it is like, it is funny how you can have like catastrophic brain fart meltdown play, and if the right guy falls on it, doesn't matter. Doesn't count.
I don't know how much or who deserves all the credit for this, because offensive coordinator Ben Johnson's getting his head coaching interviews. It's like him and Bobby going head to head in all these interviews here. But they talked again about Dan Campbell spending a lot of time with Goff and building his confidence up and all that. And you took a guy, they've gotten the best year out of Goff. The best year of his career was his highest graded year was the 2018 Rams when they went to the Super Bowl. But then they even got to the Super Bowl, and he felt limited in the Super Bowl against the Patriots. And who knows, maybe that will happen again. But to this point, they've gotten just great play out of Goff, great production out of Goff and that entire offense. And so whether it's Ben Johnson, whether it's Dan Campbell, whether it's the supporting cast, they've not only picked up a quarterback on a middle-class contract, which is, this halfway house of, crazy investment and have to have a rookie quarterback. They've maximized that, gotten the most out of Goff. And then Brad Holmes, the GM, unreal job of everything that they've built, like everything that they got in the Stafford trade, building this ecosystem to have success on both sides of the ball. Aiden Hutchinson making a ton of plays. Not the 2 sacks that he had that were gimmies, the other pass rushes that he had. So just can't say enough good things about the Lions. And that's for you, the Lions fans who complain we only talk about the other team. Talking about the Lions today, man.
Yeah,
and the fans were there all night celebrating at the Dome, as they should be.
They've done a great job. The defense, you still have to have some fairly significant questions about them, given what the Rams were able to do. Certainly in the first half, Aiden Hutchinson was great. Again, it was pretty much Aiden Hutchinson and nobody else generating the pressure. That's not an ideal situation for this team. As you get into the playoffs and you go up against better and better teams, that is an issue. But their offense is fantastic. It's talented. The playmakers, like Amon-Ra St. Brown, is so good. He made a bunch of crazy plays. The speed that they're able to deploy with Jameson Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs, even without Khalif Raymond being a big part of this the way he can be as well, like they're dangerous on offense. And if Goff doesn't have a crazy meltdown play, he's good enough to distribute the ball around and make some plays. Like he's capable of being a good quarterback. And that whole Dan Campbell thing of working on everybody's confidence and just mentality, there's something to that. I mean, there's a reason that sports psychologists play a big part in sport, period. Forget football, like pick a sport. Sports psychologists are heavily involved in this. Mentality and, being able to do that kind of thing is a huge part of this. And guys like Tom Brady just have that innately inbuilt. It's part of them. Like Michael Jordan, they're psychotic for some reason. They don't need to sit down with a sports psychologist. Whatever the sports psychologist would tell somebody to do is just how those guys are wired, and that's why they're the greatest players, greatest athletes of all time. But for everybody else, like being able to improve on that kind of thing is important, and apparently Dan Campbell seems really good at that. So
yeah, for sure.
That's one of the 17 different jobs that a head coach has, and he appears to excel at it.
That's why we're talking about our friend Bobby and talking about Ben Johnson. Like, I have no idea. Like, I don't know how good Bobby would be at that particular aspect of things. I don't know how Ben Johnson calls great plays. I have no clue how he would be at that CEO aspect of things. Or Kellen Moore. I don't know how these guys would be at that. But whatever Dan Campbell has, he's got it for a coach.
He's got a few things, evidently. He's got that. He's got, his in-game fourth down decision stuff, his aggression. I think these are all good things that they're closer to the optimal sort of analytic strategy than most people. And they're not exactly, like he's not optimal in terms of he deviates from what the analytics say, but he tends to do it more aggressively than conservatively, which I think ends him as a net positive. Like he sort of leads the tables on like win percentage picked up by going for it when you're supposed to. Now, part of that is because he just goes for it more than most coaches. Therefore, you're going to, it's selection bias. You're going to pick up more of those. But I think he ends up better because of that than if he was missing it in the opposite direction and being too conservative, which I think most people would have assumed he would be based purely off stereotypes and looking at him and saying he's clearly an old school dinosaur meathead coach. He's proven to be the exact opposite. If he didn't look like Dan Campbell, the narrative around him would be completely different. Like if he looked like, if he looked like Mike McDaniel, we would be talking about him as like this genius, cerebral head coach who's like, he's amazingly good at the analytics. He's amazingly good at the touchy-feely stuff, the confidence stuff. But actually, he just doesn't look like he should be because he's, an old school football player who was a blocking tight end for most of his career.
It's a good point. The look of the coach probably does help change perception.
Yeah.
Plus, he also started with the kneecap biting.
That didn't help. But it also might help him because I don't know. Like I think the fact that people don't expect him to be good at that stuff probably helps it work. Like the fact that that guy is giving you that message probably changes how you listen to it, how you take it over, how you take it on board, versus a dude that's, there in his glasses and, doesn't really look. I think the delivery from Dan Campbell, given the expectation, probably has an effect.
Thank you to Walt for reminding me. I thought about it yesterday, but congratulations to Mark Brunell, Lions quarterback coach, on the win.
Yeah.
So good for Mark. One other thing I wanted to highlight, Rams outside linebacker Michael Hoyt. Again, he's a listed 310 pounds. I don't know what he's playing at right now.
A lot less than that.
He's playing a lot less than that, but he kind of plays in coverage like a 300-pounder, or a former 300-pounder at least.
Well, I kind of feel sad for him at this point. Like, the Rams, for some reason, believe that Michael Hoyt is Adalius Thomas and play him like in coverage against slot receivers. When, okay, he might not be 310 pounds, but he's probably 275 and used to be a defensive tackle. Like, those things don't go together. And unless you're Adalius Thomas, you shouldn't be doing that. And he isn't. So why are we asking him to do this crazy stuff all the time? He had 19 snaps in coverage.
And that's it's they've been doing it all year. He has 256 snaps in coverage this year. And as I sent you a message last night, I think there's probably people on the Rams coaching staff who are like proud that they have gotten Michael Hoyt to become a reasonable coverage player for his size and his history and his lack of experience at the position. But at the NFL level, in a game like this, where he has to try to tackle Jahmyr Gibbs in space,
it's just unfair
or
to him.
Get enough depth in zone, against Ben Johnson's pass concepts. He gives up. Hoyt ends up giving up 6 catches for 60+ yards, all for first downs. And so, I think it's just like the Rams were behind from a personnel standpoint because of all the moves they've had to make, because they've had to invest through the draft almost exclusively over the last few years without free agents. They traded away a lot of their best players. This was just where their roster is. This is why I think this game went as expected. I think Stafford's a better quarterback than Goff. I think Stafford played a little better than Goff in this game, but the roster across the board is better for the Lions, and that's why they won. I think that in exposing someone like Hoyt in coverage, poor guy, was a good job by the Lions, and just shows the roster differences where the Lions could exploit it, and the Rams, I think, almost feel forced, like we don't have enough edge defenders to be able to mix and match the way we want to.
He had 3 fewer snaps in coverage than Kobe Durant, their nickel corner.
Yeah.
Like that, come on, what are we doing to him?
But I think a lot of it is, this was like early, we make a lot of references that only we get and our listeners maybe not, but early in Von Miller's career, he was a Sam linebacker on early downs.
Yeah.
And if you wanted Von Miller to play Sam linebacker, you could go into your base personnel and put him into space enough that you could take him out of pass rushing situations. That still kind of exists. Like, you can scheme it up to know this is how the defense is going to play it. They're going to put this guy in coverage. They're going to have 2 edges, and one of them's going to drop, and we're going to exploit that. And I think the Lions did something.
But Von Miller is like 245 pounds and can move in space. And he was an okay Sam linebacker.
But you did it because you didn't want him rushing, and you could scheme up what you wanted him to do.
Hoyt doesn't belong in coverage ever. Like, it's not even like they're finding the weaker area of his game and keeping him away from the thing he's really good at. Like, the Von Miller thing was we can trap him in Sam linebacker positioning, and therefore he's not going to rush the passer, and we essentially remove the best pass rusher in the NFL from this game, right? They're not doing that with Michael Hoyt. They're just like, they have some giant 275-pound D lineman out here covering the slot. We're just going to make them do that all the time. Why is he even doing that ever? It's insane.
I don't know.
I genuinely feel bad for Michael Hoyt because that guy is being hung out to dry in a role that he has no business attempting. And again, it's not like he's 310 or whatever. He's not 310. He's 275 or whatever it is. But the dude used to be a defensive tackle, and they've moved him to the edge. And okay, he's now become an edge, but he's not a coverage player. And they're asking him to do things more complicated than simply like fill a curl flat zone, spot drop. That's all you got to do. They're actually asking him to do like difficult coverage responsibilities deep down the field, it's unfair to the guy. He can't do that.
There was some fun battles in this game. Brian Branch versus Puka Nakua. There's some fun battles.